right? When the 2008 bubble popped, we had the worst crisis since the Great Depression. This crisis will be worse than the Great Depression, much worse. And unlike the Great Depression, when we were still on a gold standard, money actually gained value. So if you weren't in the stock market, if you weren't in the real estate market, you gained purchasing power. Assets got cheaper for you. The cost of living went down. Americans are not going to be that lucky this time. Everyone's going to get wiped out. People who don't have any money invested in the stock market are going to get wiped out because the dollar is going to get wiped out. We should have had a U.S. currency crisis years ago. When I wrote my book, Crash Proof, back in 2005 and 6, and it came out in 07. And when I was going to the money shows back then, warning about the housing bubble that the Fed had inflated and about the financial crisis that was going to hit when that bubble popped and the worst recession that we were going to get since the Depression, 10% unemployment, trillion-dollar deficits, the bankruptcy of Fannie and Freddie, everything that happened in 08, I was warning about for many, many years before 08. But what I expected to happen as a result of 08, I knew that the government would double down on its failed policy. I knew the Fed would slash rates. I knew they would start printing money again, and they would try to reflate the bubbles. My feeling at the time was that they would fail in their attempts to reflate the bubbles, and instead the dollar would succumb to these mistakes, and we would have a big drop in the dollar, and that would, relapse into a worse crisis. What I got wrong is that the world actually was fooled by our monetary magic, and the Fed was able to succeed where I thought they would fail. They did reflate a bigger bubble than the one that popped in 2008, but they're not going to be able to repeat the trick again. It is impossible to reflate a bubble bigger than the one that just popped. And so this is it. It's not three strikes or third time's the charm for the Fed, because they did it before, after the NASDAQ bubble popped. It's going to be three strikes and you're out if you are still in the dollar. The myth is that the U.S. economy was strong before COVID. It wasn't strong at all. It was the weakest it had ever been. It was the biggest bubble that had ever existed. That is why the economy imploded so quickly as a result of the COVID-19 lockdowns, right? Because we were so vulnerable. We had nothing saved for a rainy day. And it didn't just rain, it poured. And the air started to come out of this everything bubble in the fourth quarter of 2018. So we were already going to have this crisis. COVID just accelerated and is making it worse, but it was already inevitable. The air started coming out. The markets imploded in the fourth quarter of 2018. And the Federal Reserve, as I forecast at many money shows and on television, the Fed aborted its feigned attempt to normalize interest rates and shrink its balance sheet, something that I said from the beginning could never happen. And one of the only people that made that forecast. The Fed reversed course and began cutting rates in early 2019, and they went back to quantitative easing. Now, they didn't officially admit it was quantitative easing. They lied about what they were doing, but it was quantitative easing. Well, since then, since COVID, they've dropped the pretense. They now admit that they're doing QE. In fact, they admit that it's QE infinity, which again is another forecast that I got right. Long before QE4 started, even before we ended QE3, I said QE4 would be bigger than QE1, 2, and 3 combined. And that prediction has already come true because the Fed has already done more quantitative easing since COVID than in all of the years following the 2008 financial crisis. And the scale of money printing is unprecedented.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now let's continue.
The deficits are through the roof. We're running now $4 trillion deficits. The government is spending more money than ever before, where most of it is being conjured into existence by the Federal Reserve. The U.S. government is now spending more than 60 cents, or more than 60 cents out of every dollar that the U.S. government is spending is being printed. So the Federal Reserve is printing more money for the government to spend than the U.S. government is collecting in taxes. Now, you have to realize that that doesn't mean that all of this government is free, that we've dramatically increased government, right? Donald Trump has increased the size of government more than any prior president. I mean, forget about Roosevelt or Lyndon Johnson. Trump is the biggest spender of all time, the biggest borrower of all time, and therefore he is the biggest taxer of all time, because every dime the U.S. government spends is a dime of taxes, whether they want to be honest about it or not, because government spending isn't free, right? It's paid for by Americans one way or another. And if Trump and Congress don't have the guts to be honest with the American public and give them an actual bill for this unprecedented spending orgy, right? They're just going to have the Fed print up the money. That doesn't mean we escape the bill. It just means we pay the tax through a different mechanism. And that mechanism is called inflation. And in fact, I just put up a video on Twitter and my Instagram page yesterday of Warren Buffett last year correctly defining inflation as a tax. It is an expansion of the money supply. Buffett said it's the cruelest tax of all, that fewer than 1 in a million even understand, which is true, and that's by design. The government has led a propaganda effort to confuse people as to what inflation is, but it's an expansion of the money supply. It is a tax. It is a tax on savers, on people that own dollars. So there's two ways the government can pay for its spending. It can collect taxes legitimately by taking your money, or it can do it illegitimately by taking your purchasing power. So let's say the government takes your money. They take money from you and they give it to somebody else. Now somebody else can spend it and you can't, right? You see that loss of purchasing power because money is actually taken away from you. But the other way they do it, surreptitiously, is they don't take anything away from you. They just print money up out of thin air and they give that money to somebody else. And now that somebody else spends something. But the amount of goods and services to buy hasn't expanded. The government doesn't print purchasing power. It just prints claims to the existing production supply of goods and services. So what happens is the people who get the new money go out and spend it, and that bids up prices. And so what happens is prices go up, and so now you have less, you can buy less stuff. Not because you have less money, but because your money is less valuable and prices go up. So we are about to experience in America inflation on an unprecedented scale in this country. We're going to see the cost of living skyrocket, and it's going to happen very, very quickly. It's going to hit people like a ton of bricks, and they're not going to see this coming, right? More people are going to be blindsided by the dollar crisis than by the financial crisis. And the dollar crisis is much worse than a financial crisis, because when we had the financial crisis, the Fed was able to print dollars to bail everybody out. Well, when you have a dollar crisis, that doesn't matter anymore.
What to do in such a situation? Inform yourself and keep your financial education strong. We from the Compact Group offer our loyal subscribers a free educational portal with first-hand monetary, financial, and economic knowledge. Enter our invite-only Insider Club by clicking the link below. You will get access to first-class information far earlier than the rest. We have prepared a special deal for all our members where you can access a giant pool of Robert Kiyosaki's financial wisdom for just $1. To find out more, simply click the link below and join our Insider Club absolutely free. But there is more you can and should do. Build up several streams of income. More and more people realize that they have to take their future in their own hands, but they don't know how and where to start. We from Compact offer our Insider Club members unique opportunities. Strengthen your financial muscle and get the edge. Click the link below. Become part of our free Insider Club. No financial obligations. But there's one important thing you have to know. You have to become active. So do it now. Become active and see you on the other side.